Tonight, improvements for casual and gig workers in changes to workplace laws. Also, a by-election date set for Stephen Marshall's seat of Dunstan. Israel's leader rejects a ceasefire proposal for the Gaza conflict. And the Adelaide arts veteran making the most of life after a devastating diagnosis. Good evening, Isabel Dayman with ABC News South Australia. New rights and protections are on the way for hundreds of thousands of workers through the biggest update to Australia's industrial laws in a decade. The Senate's passed a sweeping package of changes that'll safeguard conditions for casuals, truckies and low-paid rideshare drivers.
Most days, Utsab Batari spends 10 hours behind the wheel as a delivery driver. He's a gig worker, working long hours and often for not much pay.
There has been instances where I've worked 100 hours and barely made $1,000.
The amount of work he gets fluctuates and how much he earns depends on which app he is working for.
We do not know how many hours we're going to work next week and how much we're going to make.
We've got workers in the gig economy that are literally rushing to their deaths.
Now, new laws are aiming to bring minimum standards to the gig economy.
Gig workers in Australia will now know that Australia is truly a country where you don't have to rely on tips to make ends meet.
The new laws apply to gig workers, like drivers with Uber and Menulog. For the first time, the Fair Work Commission will be able to set minimum standards, like a base rate of pay. That might mean delivery drivers get the same pay per minute, no matter which app they work for.
The Australian industrial relations system has modernised for a modern type of work.
Some of the major gig economy players backed the new laws, but acknowledge they'll lead to higher prices.
The exact price rises that come from the changes that will be announced today will ultimately be determined by the numbers that are set by the Fair Work Commission.
The laws passed the Senate this afternoon, wrapped in a bill with changes for casuals, truckies and a new right to disconnect, and backed by enough of the crossbench, but strongly opposed by the coalition.
If you thought as a business in Australia you were drowning under a deluge of red tape, the bad news is it is about to get worse.
Getting this tranche of legislation through the Senate is certainly a political win for the government. It's second in only a few days after the coalition folded and backed the Prime Minister's revised income tax cuts. Industrial relations can make for difficult politics, but Labor appears to have figured out how to negotiate with an often fractious Senate crossbench. There are new battles looming, however, in housing, education and a budget only a few months away. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
The date of the Dunstan by-election has been set, with voters to go to the polls on Saturday, March 23rd. It's been sparked by former Premier Stephen Marshall's decision to resign from Parliament. The seat, which takes in inner eastern suburbs like Norwood, is currently the state's most marginal, with the Liberals holding it by 0.5%. Anna Finizio will be the party's candidate, with Labor pre-selecting Cressida O'Hanlon once more, while Katie McCusker will contest the seat for the Greens. The opposition leader admits the contest will be a test of his leadership.
Well, absolutely, there will be. This is an opportunity for the voters of Dunstan to reflect on both parties.
We're going to campaign like we've got nothing to lose. You know why? Because we don't have anything to lose. The only person who can lose a seat here is David Spears and the Liberals.
The murder trial of an Adelaide man accused of killing his frail housemate and putting him in a green waste bin in December 2021 is underway. The prosecution alleges Daniel Gordon Bremner bashed to death the man he was living with in the city's eastern suburbs before putting him into a bin that was dumped at Wingfield. The victim's body was found days later by a worker who was sorting through waste. Mr Bremner entered a guilty plea to manslaughter, which has been rejected by the prosecution. The court heard Mr Bremner bought several items with the victim's credit card after the alleged murder. The trial continues. The young woman killed by a falling tree in Adelaide's parklands yesterday afternoon is being remembered as a beautiful soul who deeply loved her family and friends. The 22-year-old was fatally struck by a gum tree which split at the base, with a large part of the trunk falling on her.
A tragic incident and a young woman's family and friends now struggling with the loss of a loved one.
She absolutely loved her family with every bit of her soul. She loved her friends, her cats, and she was taken away way too soon. She had so much love and life to give.
The victim was believed to have been sitting under the tree when it fell. Her close friend Josh said she was a student and that the pair had met at the gym. He said she had told him she was going for a run in the parklands, but he became concerned when she stopped replying to his messages.
And she told me she was going here because she likes the gravel for running, and she stopped responding, and for some reason I just had a hunch that something had gone wrong.
Emergency services arrived here within minutes at the University of Adelaide soccer grounds near War Memorial Drive, but police say the 22-year-old woman died at the scene. First responders say it was a confronting situation, estimating the tree weighed as much as 10 tonnes.
If there are things to be learned out of tragedies, we should address them, but we should also acknowledge sometimes that awful tragedies occur and there may not be anyone to blame.
Arborist Marcus Lodge says factors like severe weather, decay and structural flaws can cause trees to fall.
It is something that happens from time to time. Unfortunately, not all structural flaws in trees are really obvious, and it is possible that this was one of those cases.
But he says tree failure is rare, especially one that causes an accident.
The actual number of people that are killed by trees in Australia is exceedingly low.
Grieving friends continuing to pay tribute to a young woman lost in a shocking event. Olivia Mason, ABC News.
A ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas has been rejected by a defiant Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister forcefully dismissed Hamas's terms, vowing to fight until a complete victory has been achieved.
Hopes for an imminent humanitarian pause dashed.
I would like to emphasize again that there is no solution other than total victory.
An unwavering Benjamin Netanyahu calling Hamas's proposal for a truce delusional and restating only absolute defeat would ensure Israel's security.
We are on the path of total victory. Victory is within reach.
Hamas's proposal was in response to a ceasefire offer devised by mediators from Qatar, Egypt and the United States. But Israel said no to the terms.
Haven't seen in a long time. Yeah, a few weeks. Welcome.
Despite the rejection, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken remains hopeful.
While there are some clear non-starters in Hamas's response, we do think it creates space for agreement to be reached.
As talks stalled, bombing intensified, with Israel making a push into the southern tip of Gaza.
I'm especially alarmed by reports that the Israeli military intends to focus next on Rafah, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been squeezed in a desperate search for safety.
The US was bracing for this truce setback, predicting that Israel may publicly denounce the mediation as part of its negotiating tactics. But the Americans were hoping to pull off a diplomatic success, because without a ceasefire in Gaza, risks remain that a wider conflict in this region will continue to escalate.
As in Iraq, where anger is growing. The United States launched a drone strike in Baghdad, killing a senior commander of an Iran-backed militia group. This, the Pentagon says, was in response to the deaths of 3 American soldiers in neighbouring Jordan. While the campaign of strikes seeks to deter, the threat of retaliation attacks is very real. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Pakistan is temporarily suspending mobile services to strengthen security against rising militant attacks as voting begins in its general election. Tens of millions of residents will today choose a government amid soaring inflation and rising violence. At least 30 people were killed in bombings near electoral offices late yesterday. The previous Prime Minister Imran Khan, who's currently in jail on corruption charges, urged his supporters to wait outside polling booths until results are announced. Thousands of troops have been put on duty across the country. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister has urged Australia not to give up on his country during an historic address to federal parliament. James Marape is the first Pacific leader to speak to a joint sitting of both houses. But the visit comes against a backdrop of rising regional tensions. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedjets.
New honours for an old friend.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea.
James Marape made history when he faced a packed lower house.
I welcome you to the House.
But he kept one eye on past legacies.
This is truly a historic moment for my country.
Almost 50 years ago, Australia shepherded PNG into independence. Now both countries are fashioning a framework for a new relationship.
Neighbours and mates, partners and equals.
But the backdrop is troubled. Just last month, Port Moresby was rocked by looting, and Australia is still plugging PNG's budget shortfalls.
I ask you, do not give up on Papua New Guinea. We have always bounced back from our low moments.
Last year, Australia and PNG signed a landmark security pact, but China is still pressing to strike its own policing agreement with Mr Marape's government, closely watched by Canberra.
These autocrats who use the carrot one day and the stick the next have a complete disregard for sovereignty.
January's unrest has also sapped Mr Marape's political strength, and he could face a no-confidence motion next week. The Prime Minister's confident he'll survive, but his opponents are unrelenting.
Politics in PNG, we say one day is a long time in politics.
The symbolism of today's address is clear. It's an offer that has previously been reserved for major powers like the United States and China, or to traditional friends like the United Kingdom and Canada. The Australian government is trying to say that it views Pacific nations as top-tier strategic partners in an increasingly perilous world. Facing an uncertain future,
our two countries are stuck with each other. We have no choice but to get along.
And facing it together. Stephen Jedjets, ABC News, Canberra.
Prince William has spoken for the first time since his father was diagnosed with cancer, thanking the public for their support and well wishes. The heir to the throne returned to royal duties after time away to look after his wife and is preparing to take on an increased workload while the king undergoes treatment.
Prince William is back at work after 3 weeks away from the spotlight, facing the public for the first time since news of the King's cancer battle.
We really appreciate everyone's kind messages, thank you.
This charity gala for London's air ambulance was personal. The Prince used to be one of their pilots. He was all smiles as he rubbed shoulders with guests, including Hollywood star Tom Cruise. The heir to the throne acknowledged his family's difficult month. His wife is still recovering from abdominal surgery in January.
I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you also for the kind messages of support for Catherine and for my father, especially in recent days. It means a great deal to us all. It's fair to say the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus, so I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all.
Earlier in the day, the Prince handed out state honours at an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle. With Catherine not expected back at work before Easter, the Prince and the Queen Consort will take on many of the King's public duties. The months ahead will put pressure on the royal households as they try to fulfil all of their duties and maintain a strong public presence. The King has made his first public statement since his cancer announcement, marking the 50th anniversary of independence in Grenada, one of the Commonwealth realms. I can only say how sorry I am that I cannot be with you in person to mark this momentous milestone. The monarch will now hold his weekly audience with the British Prime Minister over the phone.
I know the thoughts of the House and the country are with the King and his family. We wish His Majesty a speedy recovery and look forward to him resuming his public-facing duties in due course.
Meanwhile, Prince Harry is heading home to the US after spending a little more than 24 hours in England. He had a brief meeting with the King yesterday, but there was no royal reunion with his brother. Away from the public and press, the King is now recuperating from treatment at his Sandringham estate. Isabel Higgins, ABC News, London.
Arts Administrator Ros Hervey says she'll apply to South Australia's voluntary assisted dying scheme when her battle with motor neuron disease enters its final stages. But for now, her focus is on preparing a show for the Adelaide Festival and creating daily memories with her tight-knit family.
Rehearsal time at Restless Dance Theatre and producer Ros Hervey is on hand with the help of her daughter, international actress Tilda Cobham Hervey. Powering through 10-hour days, you wouldn't guess the 58-year-old has motor neuron disease. The day she was diagnosed is one she'll never forget.
That's hard. My partner, who I have been with for 38 years, we don't want to focus on the sadness.
So partner Jeff, Tilda and son Huey decided to make every day special, including a trip to Japan soon after she was diagnosed.
It was a holiday to make memories, and I guess that's what's really important to me. It's making memories, not just for me, but for everybody around me.
MND is a degenerative condition that affects motor nerves and eventually causes muscle paralysis. Ms Hervey's mobility is already affected, and she says when the time comes, she'll turn to South Australia's voluntary assisted dying scheme introduced a year ago.
I'm a control freak, and MND is about losing control, and the voluntary assisted dying law will enable me to make that choice to die when I want to die.
But for now, it's all about producing another top-class show and creating memories. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
The family of missing Ballarat woman Samantha Murphy has made a heart-wrenching plea in the hope of finding the 51-year-old mother alive. After 5 days of searching, police are yet to uncover any strong leads into her disappearance, but say there are no suspicious circumstances at this stage.
Distraught and in tears, Jess Murphy is living a nightmare.
Mum's a really strong woman and she's far too determined to give up this fight. I know she's out there somewhere, so if you could please continue to search for her, to give us something to work with, we'd really appreciate it.
Summoning all the courage she could muster, the eldest daughter of Ballarat East woman Samantha Murphy issued a plea for her return after going missing 5 days ago, speaking directly to her mother.
Mum, we love you so much and we miss you and we need you at home with us.
Samantha's husband Mick was by his daughter's side, struggling to comprehend what's happened to his wife.
People just don't vanish into thin air. Someone's got to know something, you know, whether it be any little thing that you might think's relevant, just call the police.
Police say the mother of three left her home just after 7 a.m. on Sunday for a run in the Wulwukarung Regional Park. Their search for Samantha has now expanded to the suburbs on the outskirts of the park and are looking for CCTV from Sunday morning.
Certainly if they find anything of interest on the footage, we'd like them to let police know that.
A routine runner in the area, the 51-year-old's disappearance is out of character, but police say no suspicious circumstances have been identified at this stage.
And we're keeping an open mind and considering all possibilities, and we're being extremely thorough and methodical with that investigation.
But potential leads have so far met dead ends. CCTV thought to be of Samantha running past a property has been discounted, as have items found in nearby bushland. Police say they're working through an enormous amount of information received from the public. There are still dozens of community members out helping in the search, vowing they won't stop until she's found.
We just need everyone to keep looking. It may be day 5, but Sam is the most strongest person, both mentally and physically.
Just keep going, keep encouraging each other. I know that it's really hard to lose hope at the minute, but I do believe that we will find her.
Hope her family is clinging on to.
Please come home soon. I can't wait to see you and to give you the biggest hug when I do.
Laura Mayers, ABC News, Ballarat.
Community legal centres offer free advice to vulnerable people across the country. Many centres say they're at crisis point due to limited funding and can only help fewer than 1% of those who contact them.
Rachel had acquired a very large loan.
at a time when she was experiencing domestic violence.
I was signed up to a huge debt under circumstances that the bank should have known were wrong, and things were not okay.
She was struggling to get support.
I had been trying to get help myself for a very long time, and I got put in touch with Caxton.
Caxton Legal Centre is one of the largest free community providers in the country.
Over the last 5 years, we had 150,000 people call us for help.
But due to funding, less than 1% of those requests were helped.
They can't get legal aid, they can't afford a lawyer, and we have to let them know that we can't help.
Australia's 165 legal centres are facing unprecedented demand and funding shortages.
The centres are mostly supported by a combination of federal and state funding.
We need at least $125 million additional per year to ensure that centres are able to start meeting demand.
A spokesperson for the Federal Attorney General says a review is underway into how future arrangements can provide better access to justice. Queensland's Justice Department says the state government is working closely on that report, expected later this month. Free legal advice led to Rachel regaining her financial freedom.
I never have to worry about that debt ever again. I never thought I would find someone who could actually help me.
With thousands still waiting. Sarah Richards, ABC News.
Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson speaks with Foreign Minister Penny Wong about the ongoing crisis in the Middle East.
Does the US and its allies, obviously including Australia, have any influence at all in how the Netanyahu government is conducting this war?
Well, what I can do is to use Australia's respected voice to advocate for peace.
To finance now, and the local share market rose again today while the Aussie dollar held steady. Here's Alan Kohler.
The share market has now gone up 11 of the past 14 trading sessions, so while the first 2 weeks of the year were rubbish for share traders, the next few weeks have been great. Today's standout was AGL Energy after announcing that profit had quadrupled to $400 million. Slightly awkward after Alan Fels accused the electricity industry of price gouging yesterday. Not us, said the company, and we spent $35 million helping vulnerable customers. Speaking of price gouging, the ABS has produced some cost of living indexes which showed that the hardest hit are those with a job. The cost of living for employees went up 6.9% last year, more than the inflation rate of 4.1% and much more than those who aren't working. And this chart shows where most of the problem is: housing. The average cost of housing for employees per week has increased 14.5% in 2 years. Meanwhile, China's statisticians announced today that consumer prices there fell by 0.8% in January, continuing 4 straight months of deflation. So their cost of living's fine, except, of course, too much deflation and you're in serious trouble. The Chinese share market went up on the news following gains in New York and Tokyo. Oh, and one more thing about the matter of prices. Look at the cost blowout of the Reserve Bank's renovation of its headquarters in Martin Place, Sydney. From the initial estimate of $260 million to $500 and now $850 million. That's obviously why interest rates have gone up so much. That's got to stop. Iron ore and oil went up while copper and silver fell, and the Australian dollar is steady at just above 65 US cents. And that's finance.
A dominant display from all-rounder Marizanne Kapp has helped South Africa defeat Australia in a women's one-day international for the first time. Kapp made 75 as the tourists set the home team a rain-revised target of 23 at North Sydney Oval. Kapp then tore through the Australian top order and finished with 3 for 12. Australia was dismissed for 149, giving South Africa an 84-run victory. The Proteas trail 6 points to 4 in the multi-format series.
It was nice to observe from a fast bowler point of view, but I suppose from a team point of view, not so nice. I think, we all know what Kappy can do with the ball, and she used the conditions beautifully tonight and bowled really well.
Victoria has moved to the top of the one-day cup table, beating South Australia by 3 wickets at the Junction Oval. The Redbacks stumbled to a 7 for 132 before finishing with 231. Victoria reached the target with almost 5 overs to spare. The Victorian Openers shared a century partnership at better than 5 and over. That set up a chase for a bonus point for getting the runs within 40 overs. But after losing 4 for 23, the Vics decided to be satisfied with just a win. The loss ensures the Redbacks will finish last, even if they win their final round match. Adelaide United coach Carl Viet will make wholesale changes for tomorrow night's home clash with Perth. The Reds were embarrassed 4-0 at Hindmarsh last week by the Central Coast. Viet says it's the worst the team has performed in his time in charge. He'll now follow through on a promise to swing the axe to find a winning combination.
We'll go close to changing half the team. The performance last week just wasn't at the level that it needed to be, and those players will miss out because of that.
Olympic Committee heavyweights and the Brisbane Lord Mayor have put another nail in the coffin for the Gabba redevelopment slated for the 2032 Games. There are growing calls for the $2.7 billion project to be axed, while the state government denies controversy about the project has affected support for the Olympics. Rachel Rieger reports.
A death knell for the Gabba redevelopment.
The Gabba rebuild is dead, buried and cremated.
The Brisbane Lord Mayor backed calls from Olympic heavyweight John Coates that the controversial $2.7 billion project doesn't stack up.
John Coates calls a spade a spade.
A 60-day review into key Olympic venues for the 2032 Games is ongoing. Mr Coates, who's the Vice President of the International Olympic Committee, declined to speak to the ABC, but told News Corp he met with the panel this week and said, "We should abandon the Gabba. The Olympic movement was something that did have community support. Now suddenly we're on the nose in Brisbane."
I don't think the Olympics and Paralympics of 2032 are on the nose. I think people are excited about it, but I think people are questioning the cost.
Mr Coates has suggested the opening and closing ceremonies should instead be held at Lang Park, and athletics moved to the Queensland Sport and Athletics Centre. The Brisbane Olympics president, Andrew Liveris, says Mr Coates should be listened to, while the AOC has also backed calls for a more creative solution than rebuilding the Gabba. The Greens and Wollongabba residents who have protested want the state government to confirm if the project has been dumped for good.
We're asking for Stephen Miles to come out now, today, and take the Gabba rebuild off the table.
Look, I know you're trying to ask me a question to say, is it dead, is it isn't? And this is a clean slate. And I welcome all stakeholders' feedback into it.
The review is due back in March. Rachel Rieger, ABC News, Brisbane.
Let's take a look at all the weather details now, but first, tonight's photo of canola crops was taken near Clare and sent to us by Paul Traherne. It was warm and sunny once again over Adelaide today, reaching a top of 29.1 degrees in the city after dropping to a low of 14.2. Across the state today, a high-pressure system brought another dry and mostly sunny day with tops of 29 degrees for Whyalla and Naracoorte. Scattered cloud in troughs over northern WA, the NT and Queensland will continue to bring heavy rain and storms while drawing heat to the west coast. An onshore flow will also maintain showers over parts of New South Wales, Victoria and Tassie. Elsewhere, high pressure should keep the remainder mostly clear and dry. Around the country tomorrow, showers, possible storms and 31 degrees for Darwin, 27 in Sydney, mostly cloudy and 22 in Melbourne and a sweltering top of 41 for Perth. Closer to home, it'll be mostly dry and very warm across the north tomorrow, apart from some isolated showers and thunderstorms about the far northeast, a top of 36 degrees for Lee Creek. Further south, conditions will remain fine and sunny with warm tops of 35 degrees for Renmark and 27 in Coonawarra. There's a strong wind warning for several coasts tomorrow, including the Spencer Gulf and Gulf St Vincent, and a flood watch continues for Cooper Creek. Another fine and mostly sunny day for Adelaide tomorrow, heading for 29 down to 14 overnight. On the waters, southeasterly winds to 25 knots, seas to 1.5 metres. Sunrise around 20 to 8 and sunset about 8:15. Looking ahead, it'll begin to really heat up over the next 7 days. 34 on Sunday, a scorching top of 38 on Monday, 24 degrees on Wednesday. That's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks for your company. Stay with us. 7:30's next.